Hey, warriors, welcome back to another episode of the Invisible Diaries.
We're your hosts,
I'm Misty.
and I'm Amber.
And today we're going to be discussing vestibular disorders. As always, a quick disclaimer, any information discussed in this podcast is strictly our opinion and for informational purposes only. It is not meant as medical advice and should not be taken that way. Always consult with your doctor or medical team.
We know battling chronic illness can be hard, and if you find yourself or someone you love in crisis and need someone to talk to, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, which provides free and confidential support in the U.S. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Again, that number is 1-800-273-TALK. If you prefer to text instead, you can access help by texting the crisis text line at 741-741, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now let's get started.
Yay! I can't believe we're on episode 20.
I know, I'm so excited.
Crazy. And speaking of 20, we're actually almost at 20,000 followers on Instagram, which means, and we're also at our 1-year anniversary. So we're going to be doing a big giveaway like any minute now. We need to figure out what we're giving away. So we're also really excited today because we have an awesome guest on our show, and her name is Etta. You can find her on Instagram at Vestibular Guru. That's VESTIBULARGURU. And Etta is from Charleston, and she's going to share her story today. So go ahead, Etta, introduce yourself. Say hello.
Hey guys, so my name is Etta. I live in Charleston, South Carolina right now. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., but I lived for most of my adult life in Miami, Florida. So I just happen to be here now. I live with my fiance. We refer to each other as husband and wife, but it's nothing official. And, we're just living. Basically, what happened to me, I'll start talking about all of that. In November of 2019, so last year, at the very beginning of the month, I noticed that there was something wrong with the inside of my ears, and it felt like it was both of my ears. When I went to blow my nose, or if I held my nose like this and tried to breathe, it felt like a balloon inside of my head. I didn't have any pain and I didn't have any dizziness at that time. So I sort of put it off. Then about 2 weeks later, the dizziness started to set in, and it was constant. It wasn't bad dizziness, it wasn't affecting my walking, it wasn't affecting my day-to-day activities, it was just there. And it felt like something was buzzing in the back of my head, at the base of my skull. And I didn't really think much of it. It wasn't getting worse, it wasn't getting better. And then it started to just become more and more, and it wouldn't go away. The dizziness wouldn't go away. I thought that maybe it was hormonal. I couldn't figure it out. So I went to a chiropractor because I thought there was something maybe wrong with my neck, because it felt like it was coming from the back of my head. So the chiropractor, he did an adjustment on me and he said, "You're fine, you'll feel better. You're a little out of whack, one leg's longer than the other, what they always tell you. And you'll start to feel better immediately." And so I walked home and I did not feel better. And this is around Thanksgiving now. So the next day I woke up and things were still very off. I went to the doctor's office, and by the time I got to the doctor's office, I was hysterical because I thought that I possibly had a brain tumor. I have a history of tumor from whenever I was younger, and it happened in my arm. It was taken out, but that experience was very, very traumatizing for me, and I have medical PTSD because of that. So I walked into the office hysterical. The doctor looked at me, he did an exam, he was like, "You're fine." He's like, "I think you have a little bit of anxiety. And I think that you're just going through something." And I was like, I'm not going through anything. I don't have anxiety. and he was like, oh no, but like you do, like there's something that has happened to you in your life. And I was like, okay, yeah, like we're going to talk about my alcoholic mom and my dead father and like all of this stuff. So he really like brought it all out. He gave me steroids, and he gave me CBD oil and Afrin, and he's like, you'll be fine. So about a week later, I was not fine. I was actually worse. So I went into a primary care physician's office without an appointment. I just walked in, no appointment. And I had a full-on nervous breakdown in the waiting room because I was like, I am 100% positive that I have a brain tumor. Like, you need to see me, you need to help me. And she said, okay, fine, like let's go back. She believed me. She understood that there was a problem. She looked into my ears and said that I had fluid behind my left ear. But she said, let's go ahead and do a CT scan today and find out if it's MS or if there's any type of mass or anything. I go to get the CT scan, again, a nervous breakdown in their office. Like, I walked into the room, I saw the machine, the machine you go into to get the CT scan, and I completely lost it. And the technician, thankfully, was so kind to me and could see that I was struggling so much. And after he had done the scan and everything, I said, please tell me, did you see anything? Like, I need to know. He's like, well, your doctor's going to diagnose this, but I can tell you right now, you have completely healthy brain tissue. So the doctor then saw the scan and came back to me and said, okay, you don't have anything. You're dizzy because you have a middle ear infection. And she put me on a very high dose of meclizine, which is like a motion sick medication, but it's also an antihistamine, causes dryness, to help dry out the inside of my ear. So I was taking a very high dose of that. I started to get better. So by Christmas time, I was operating at 100%. I wasn't having dizziness. There was nothing. So I thought everything was fine. I thought I was over it. I thought, okay, the middle ear infection's gone, fine. January 5th, we were at home and we had taken the dogs out for a walk. My husband left and I was just, something felt weird, like all of a sudden. 1 second later, I completely dropped to the floor, like fully fell down onto the floor and just started vomiting immediately. And I was like, something's wrong. Something is wrong. And so my husband came back. I called him. I couldn't walk. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't do anything. He came back and was like, do you want to go to the hospital? Like, what's going on? I was having such bad heart palpitations. I was hot. I was sweaty. I was like, I couldn't see anything. Like, the world was like not normal. And I said, call 911, because I was completely unable to walk. So there was no way I was going to be able to get into the car to go to the hospital. So the ambulance came and they took me to the emergency room. The doctor at the emergency room, they did everything. They did a chest x-ray. They did an EKG. I had my brain scan info, so they knew I didn't have like MS or, anything wrong with my brain. And he took some blood and said, you're fine. There's nothing wrong. And I said, no, there's something wrong. And he's like, oh, well, you're dehydrated and you have low potassium, so that's why you're feeling this way. And I was like, that's not it, because I've been vomiting for the past few hours, so that's why those things are showing up. And he's like, no, you're fine. So I could barely walk at that point. And I walked out, like somehow we got home. Like, my husband came and picked me up in the car. We went home and I didn't know, like, it was so scary because at that point, like, my dizziness was 1000% worse. I could not walk. I couldn't go up and down the stairs at my home. I couldn't look at anything without everything moving. And I was scared. I thought that I thought that at that point that I had MS, Lyme disease. I thought I couldn't figure it out. So I went to an ENT And the ENT did all the tests. He tested my hearing. They looked at everything that they possibly could. And they're like, "You're fine." And I said, "No, I'm not." He's like, "Well, I think that you have something called vestibular migraine." And he's like, "So that's the good news. The bad news is I do not treat this, but I can put you on some medication to try to get you, feeling a little bit better." So he put me on a type of antidepressant called nortriptyline, and it's not an SSRI, it's a tricycline antidepressant that helps to treat vertigo. I was put on low dose steroids, prednisone, for 3 months, and then taking low dose Xanax twice a day. And it helped a little bit, and it's taken me now about 3 months to feel a little bit better, but I'm still not 100%. I have made an appointment with a neurologist, but neurologists are very, very hard to come by. They're few and far between, and especially neurologists that are able to treat vestibular disorders. It's very hard to get in with them. My appointment was scheduled for yesterday, but due to everything going on with the virus, I was unable to go to the hospital. So I'm now not going until June. So we have a neurologist, a family neurologist. I had called her and explained everything what had happened to me. And she said that she thought that it was also vestibular migraine, but also something called vestibular neuritis, which is where you get an infection, and that infection attacks your ear, your vestibular system, and it can trigger this vestibular migraine, and it can trigger these things. In learning about the disease and the condition, I realize now that I've probably had this for a very, very long time. I've always had a lot of anxiety, a lot of panic. I've always had something called derealization that goes along with this disease. I've had this stuff forever, and I've had vertigo on and off, but everything was very like short episodes. And now I'm at a chronic level where I have this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Some days are worse, some days are better. Some days I can literally run laps, and some days I can barely get out of bed. So it has completely disrupted every single aspect of my life right now. I can't drive, I can't work, I can't be reliable for anything right now because the way I feel day to day is totally different. Every day is a surprise.
What are your main daily symptoms?
So the main daily symptoms for me are I have very bad brain fog. So like my thoughts are a little different. I have some level of dizziness every day. I don't have true vertigo, which is where you feel like the whole room is spinning. I have more centralized vertigo every day to some level where I just feel like I'm spinning, or I feel like I'm on a boat rocking back and forth, or moving in some way. When I walk, I feel like I'm walking on a trampoline. So it's like, it's different. I don't know how to explain it, but, and then I have something called derealization. So a big part of vestibular migraine is feeling disassociated from your actual body. So you feel like you are living outside of your body, and it's almost like being on an acid trip 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A long time ago, they used to call this Alice in Wonderland syndrome, because you literally feel like you're living in Alice in Wonderland. They've called it floating women syndrome, where they've actually put women in mental institutions because they thought they were going crazy. But no, it's migraine. It's just not a migraine with headaches. So a problem with the way that this disease is called is vestibular migraine, but I don't actually get headaches. And everybody's like, "Oh, you have migraine, like, oh, you just take some Advil, you take whatever." And it's like, no, but I don't get headaches. I get all of the other migraine symptoms every single day, except for the headache. Occasionally I do get the headache, and when I do get the headache, it is absolutely earth-shattering. It's the most incredible pain I've ever felt in my life. They've actually compared it to childbirth. So, and the other symptoms are my vision is a little strange. I've had to remove all of the artwork off of my walls because it felt like everything was sinking in on me. I've had to remove the carpets. This carpet I have, but I've had to remove the carpets from downstairs because they look like they were moving all the time. So I've had to make everything very plain around me because patterns and things really mess up my vision. And I'm not tired. I just, head pressure, it's impossible to explain unless you've experienced it. But it's very, very debilitating. When anything attacks your inner ear, it completely messes up your whole being. It messes up your whole sense of reality, your equilibrium, everything is just off. It's hard to explain, but it's just everything's off. So that's sort of what I go through from day to day, you know?
What do you think is one of the biggest things that you've learned since you started this process? Because you said you were diagnosed, or you kind of started this Thanksgiving of last year?
Is whenever it started.
That's when it got really bad, but you feel like you've had symptoms your whole life.
Yeah.
What do you think is one of the biggest things you've learned thus far in advocating for yourself?
So, that this is an invisible illness. I look fine. Everything looks okay. But what is going on inside my head is not okay. It's like, I said, whenever I was really bad and I was having panic attacks pretty much every day, I explained to my husband, I said, you could not live this life that I live. You would freak out. The area of your brain that controls migraine also controls anxiety, and it also controls panic. So that's why I have always been at this level of panic and anxiety for literally my whole life. And I think that reaching out to other people that are going through this, because I learned right from the time that I got diagnosed by the ENT, I knew doctors don't know anything. They don't, the emergency room is not equipped to handle chronic illness at all. I have to avoid going back there under all circumstances. And I knew immediately that I had to find other people that had this, that could help me. So that's why I started the Instagram account. I joined a local support group. I started talking to people immediately, like literally that day, even though I couldn't see the phone properly or the computer properly, I knew I had to reach out to people. So getting in touch with other people that have lived like this for 5, sometimes even 10 years was the single best thing that has helped me get through this. There is no treatment for dizziness. There's treatment for migraines, but there's nothing that can take dizziness away. I later recently found out that my paternal grandmother lived like this, and they thought she was going crazy also.
Wow.
And my aunt has this also. They don't call it vestibular migraine. They don't know what this is. They just say they have vertigo, and I'm like, oh, I know what this is. Like, you have to listen to me, but they don't. But yeah, the single best thing for me has been able to reach out to other people that have this. They can give you tips and tricks. There's no single treatment that's going to help any of this, and the treatment is different for every person. What works for one person may not work for the other. You know, there's a lot of guessing when it comes to medication. Even like talking to the ENT, I've had to, call him and, say, this isn't working. Like, can we have something else? Like, can I have a rescue medication? And it's a rough road, and I'm still there. Like, I'm still in the process, but we've nailed it down pretty clearly what this is. So I think sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think it's really amazing that it's kind of one of the reasons that Misty and I started what we started, because, building this community was about getting people connected, which is exactly what it
Yeah.
sounds like what you've done. Because when you can't get help, from the people that you're seeking help from,
Yeah.
sometimes it's like you say, because no two people are the same. No two people, you can have similar symptoms, but not similar experiences. You can have different treatment options.
Yes.
Sometimes it may work even for an individual. Something that worked yesterday may not work today. So it's so complex. And that's what Misty and I have found, even with starting this community, is that it's, it's so important to be able to connect with someone that goes, hey, you know what? I know exactly what you're feeling like. And while our experiences are different, I got you.
Yes.
Because,
yes.
it feels extremely isolating. And we've talked about it a lot. There's a lot of people experiencing that now with what's going on in the world with the pandemic.
I
And
know.
obviously for those of us with chronic illness, we've experienced it for as long as we've been sick. So it's interesting to see how much it affects, mental health as well as physical health. So I think it's amazing that you're, building community for that as well.
Yeah, I knew right away that was going to be the only way that I was going to be able to get information, because I had already gone to so many doctors, had so many conversations about, oh, you have anxiety and you need talk therapy. It's like, I've had a lot of talk therapy. I know that my family's crazy. I know that my childhood was chaotic, and I know this, but something is still not right. And reaching out to these, to people in the community is, I think, so much more beneficial than what the doctors have given me, because they give you no information, little to nothing. There's a lot of different types of vestibular disorders, and they all sort of mimic each other. So even though I was diagnosed by my ENT, there still could be something else that the neurologist is able to discover. But it doesn't really matter. Like, at first, with the virus and everything going on, I was very upset that I'm not going to be able to go to these appointments, and I'm not going to have these other tests. And finally somebody said to me, they were just like, it doesn't really matter, because you're getting better now and you're having small relapses, and this is just what life is going to be. And they are just going to give you a medication that may or may not work. And if it doesn't work, then you're going to come back in, and, you're going to get passed back and forth between doctors, and there's not going to be a lot of information. It's information coming from complete strangers. And honestly, the support that I've received from people that I don't even know, that I've never even met in person, has been better than what my family and my friends and other people close to me have been able to offer, because they don't understand. They think, oh, she's a hypochondriac and she's overreacting, and oh, this is just the way she is. And it's like, no, there is something wrong, and there has been something wrong for a long time. And in the beginning of being diagnosed, you think, how am I ever gonna live like this? Because now I'm at the chronic level where it doesn't go away. And you think, how am I gonna ever live like this? And you have suicidal thoughts. That is so real. You think, and I even at one point said to my husband, I said, if they diagnose me with something like MS or something even more serious, please let me take control of my own life. And that is, it's real. And a lot of people have been in that situation. When I was growing up, my father had Alzheimer's disease. And so I watched somebody die from a neurological disorder very, very slowly and very, very painfully. And so that's why I said, please let me take control of my own life. And now I'm not there anymore. We've gotten, life it's going to be different, but it doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just different. And honestly, I think it's been a blessing in disguise, because I've met people.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. Go ahead.
Yeah, that kind of goes with the stages of grieving a chronic illness. You have, at that moment, you were in that depression stage, and then you came to the acceptance stage. I think it's important to realize that we do go through multiple stages, and sometimes we continue to loop back around on days when it's rough. And I feel like having an invisible illness, why we are trying to start this community is because, whether you have a vestibular disorder or you have an autoimmune disorder or insert invisible illness here, we all kind of get the similar treatment where unless a doctor actually specializes in it, which an ER doctor won't, a regular, doctor most likely isn't familiar with it, then you're going to feel alone. You're going to be told you're crazy. You're going to be sent from doctor to doctor. And so I think that's why it is super important to kind of have your own community and to share your story, because, you're going to meet other people that actually get it, who believe you, who can maybe even help you or guide you. And so I went onto vestibular.org, a website, just to kind of, I'm going to read a little bit from them.
Sure.
About what a vestibular disorder is. The vestibular system includes the parts of the inner ear and brain that process the sensory information involved with controlling balance and eye movement. If disease or injury damages these processing areas, vestibular disorders can result. Vestibular disorders can also result from or be worsened by genetic or environmental conditions or occur for unknown reasons. And so, like you were saying before, there are several different vestibular disorders. You have the vestibular migraines, vestibular neuritis, Meniere's disease. There's a lot of different, even autoimmune disorders and allergies can actually trigger these. And, I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, so because of the connective tissue, I get vestibular issues sometimes. And so I can't imagine having that part all the time, because when I have had those seldom episodes, they're very scary. And then when you mention the anxiety thing, you actually do get episodes of tachycardia when you have these episodes, which also can feel like anxiety. So the tricky part is it's like, well, which came first, like the chicken or the egg type of situation, or maybe it's a combo of both. But, at the end of the day, I think it's admirable of you finding your strength and finding your way to overcome this. I have a really good friend of mine, Leah, who has Meniere's disease, and I see her struggle where she'll be feeling great on top of the world and like she has control, and then she gets hit hard with an episode, and it's so hard going through those ups and downs. And so my next question really was just going to be like, as far as like any diagnosis, advice on how to get diagnosed when you do feel like, okay, this might be something I have, like where to start.
Sure. So anybody who might be feeling this way and hasn't been diagnosed, the one thing that I want to say is brain tumors, MS, and Lyme disease are all very, very rare things. If you are having vertigo and a headache, it is so rare that you have a brain tumor and that you have MS, because when you go on to Dr. Google, that's what they're going to tell you that you have. So try not to do that. I think the biggest thing, I feel very lucky about being diagnosed, because there are people who live 3, 4, even 5 years before they even have it, they're anywhere close to a diagnosis. So I think you just have to keep going to doctors. You have to keep doing the tests. You have to keep trying until you can figure it out. If you have to travel, if you have to go someplace else, do it. Do what you have to do. And, as women, when we go into a doctor's office and we start to cry or we start to have a meltdown, they automatically want to say, okay, well, you have a little bit of a mental health thing going on here. It's like, well, no, that's part of it, but I'm sorry, but there's something way bigger that's going on. We know our bodies. We get a period every month, so we know our bodies really well. We know what's happening. And I think just keep on trying, keep on. If you have to wait 3 months, if you have to wait 6 months, it's going to be worth it, because you'll find out what your problem is. Meniere's disease and vestibular disorders, they have a little bit of a different treatment. So does triple PD and BPPV. They they all differ a little bit, but they all have sort of a similar treatment. And just don't just listen to people who tell you you only have anxiety, and then that's just it. Like that's not it. I now, with my social media, I have people who reach out to me almost every day from all over the world, and they're like, oh, I have this symptom and I've been going through this for 2 years. Do you think it could be this? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And you need to go to somebody and tell them that you think you have this. And then they will be able to, they'll be able to see that, it's hard to, I have a lot of brain fog with this also. So my word retrieval can be difficult, but they have to be diagnosed. You have to go through a process of elimination. So they have to eliminate the Lyme disease, and they have to eliminate MS, and they have to eliminate brain tumors. And once they've eliminated all that, and then they still tell you is all you have is anxiety, but you know that that's not the case, keep going. Go to the next doctor, go to the next doctor, go to the next doctor. Keep on going. Do not stop. Reach out to a community of people who can help you. There's a resource, the Dizzy Cook. On her website, she has a list of doctors all over the country that specialize in vestibular disorders, all different types of vestibular disorders. There's a book. This is called Heal Your Headache. And this doesn't refer to just migraine headaches. This refers to vestibular disorders also. And this has a program of it's a diet that helps heal migraine. It says headache, but don't forget about the headache part. It's actually migraine. And this really explains what migraine is. This really talks in depth about the vestibular system and about diet and how all of that goes together. And so that's the biggest things, keep going and, try to find as many resources you can out there and try to find some community. There's local support groups. The vestibular.org website has support groups all over the world. If you don't have a support group close to you, you can always start one. You can become an ambassador of their company, and they will help you get together other patients. And talking to the doctors, so in Charleston, South Carolina, this isn't exactly a booming metropolis. So all of the people that are in my support group that have vestibular disorders have all gone to the same doctors. So the doctors can also help you connect with other people. Like they have here, the one guy in the whole region has helped people come together.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I would love for all doctors to do that.
Yeah.
Who is that doctor?
His name is Dr. Habib Rizik. I haven't actually gone to him yet because of the virus. He's actually located at the hospital, which is literally only like 2 or 3, about a mile away from my house. But
wow.
They've moved all the appointments, so I will go in June. But I still have my ENT who I can refer to if I have problems.
And on our blog post, if you go to theinvisibleidiaries.com, when we share this post, we'll have the links that we discussed, as well as the YouTube and your Instagram and everything that we talked about. So that way, if anyone wants to check any of those out, it will be available.
Sure.
Yes. Etta, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, and remind everybody once again that's listening how they can find you and connect with you.
Okay, so I'm only on Instagram. I tried to go on Facebook, but it was a little dark. Things got a little dark. So I'm only on Instagram, and it's at Vestibular Guru. I am not a guru. I actually made the account as like a joke of like a beauty guru, like those people who do makeup on YouTube.
Yeah.
So it was a joke, but now people actually think that I'm a guru. It's very strange. A lot of people in India have reached out. So strange, but yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Vestibular Guru. I have a lot of things posted, like tips and tricks and different essential oils and diet things, that can be plant-based, vegetarian, all different kinds of things that can help, you know, people that have all types of vestibular disorders.
That's incredible.
Great. Great.
That's
Well,
awesome. Thank you
for
so
starting
much.
this organization. You know, this is really good that you have you have people that can reach out to other people with invisible illnesses, because as you know, people say to me all the time, "Oh, well, you look fine. You look great." I'm like,
You don't look
but
sick.
it's not okay. It's not great. And they're like, I even had a guy tell me on the phone, he's like, for a work thing, he's like, he's like, I'm not convinced. He's like, you sound great. He's like, you really need to look at this again. I'm like, I've looked at it literally 1,000 times, and this
We
is
hear that all the time.
This isn't a choice.
You need to check this out again. Like, are you sure? I'm like, yes, I'm sure. Like, even sitting here right now, like,
We all look great, but we're all messed up.
like, I have sunshine right in front of me, and I feel like my eyeballs are on fire. So, and the world is still moving. So, it's just, and especially as women, I can't say enough that I know how it is for these poor women with these invisible illnesses. It's like they expect us to be like superhumans, and that we're just maybe a little bit sad about something that happened.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
You know?
Or it's our period.
Cry. Yeah.
Oh, it's your period. Yeah, you should. Oh, the best thing was I had one doctor reach out to me and said, we can medically induce menopause. I was like,
wow.
no, like, no.
Don't touch my hormones. Yeah.
Absolutely not.
crazy.
That's not like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, we had talked about that briefly before, about women being hospitalized for all these different illnesses before. And that was one of the treatments, was mandatory hysterectomies. Because they just thought if they took it, then that was what was making them crazy, which is nuts.
Like, you're just having a little womanly thing. So let's just do that. And so, no. And I have at so many points in my life felt such panic and such hysteria and such chaos inside of my brain, and had these suicidal thoughts and had all of this going on for so long. And I always thought, I'm just crazy. And now there's like a huge validation that no, there was something very wrong. You cannot just sit around and go to the therapy and talk about your crazy, chaotic childhood and your alcoholic mother and your drug addict dad. Like, okay, we've addressed
just trauma. Yeah.
We've addressed all of these things. It is what it is, and still it's not okay. So
yeah, I went that route too. I've had quite a family history myself, and childhood trauma, whatever you name it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hear that often too from people that maybe this was like my fault because I had to fix my inner trauma and heal my past, and that especially from even just family members or loved ones, and and not necessarily that I believed that, but just out of pure desperation, I thought, why not just try that? And so I did see a therapist. She was amazing. She was great. She did help me work through a lot of stuff, which is important. We're huge advocates for mental health. I'm glad I did that. I'll continue to do talk therapy, but has it changed my health? No. I still have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
That's what I kept
health issues.
People like, I've talked about it and it has helped my mental health. There's a woman on YouTube. Her name is Svea Ellen. I'll send you her link. She actually went to a wellness camp for like 30 days, and she spent all this money and took all this time out away from her children and everything, went off to this wellness retreat for 30 days and came back and was like, okay, so I've worked through all of these issues, but I'm still not okay. And her body started going numb, and she had numbness around her face, and went to the emergency room, and the director of the emergency room looked her in her face and said, I think you have MS. And she didn't. She had vestibular migraine the whole time.
Wow.
She had vestibular, I mean, that's it. You know, she had vestibular migraine. And there's so many women that are like that. They're like, oh, I was told I was crazy for years, like since childhood. I remember like one of the big things with this, any type of vestibular disorder, is that Alice in Wonderland syndrome, the reversed reality, the feeling like you're not living in your body. And people were like, okay, I'm just nuts. I'm just crazy. And you're like, no, we actually know what this is. It's the migraine nerve, and it's the inner ear. It's this little, I mean, the thing, it's like this big, and it literally controls your entire body.
Crazy. Well, and another thing that we mention almost like every episode, I think, but 1 in 20 Americans are misdiagnosed. So
Yeah.
I think it ends up being about like 12 million per year, something like that. That's a lot of people. Those statistics to me are crazy, and like that's another part of the reasons why I'm in school, is because like I want that number to change. That's not an acceptable number. 1 in 20, you know, Americans. That's a lot of Americans every year that are misdiagnosed. And I know you've had misdiagnosis. We all have here. You know, sometimes it takes several misdiagnoses to get to where we needed. But the sad and the scary part is some people get that misdiagnosis and that's where they're stuck, and because they're like, okay, this is what it is, when really, you know, looking ahead, not because they're not advocating or questioning or going to the right doctor, you know, they're not getting the true diagnosis, and therefore they're not getting the true treatment. You know. And one of the main misdiagnoses I feel is the whole, you know, anxiety thing or panic disorder. I mean, and that's for everybody. Heart disorder, you got panic disorder. You got a migraine, you got a panic disorder. You got autoimmune, Amber over there, you got panic disorder. Well, you know what? You're giving us panic disorder because like we want help so desperately.
Yes. And that's why whenever in the beginning I went into, you know, the primary care physician's office, and I had a nervous breakdown in the waiting room. And I said, there is something wrong with me and I need you to listen to me. And she thankfully was like, I am going to help you. I will help you figure out what is wrong, you know? And that day she sent me in for the brain scan, and she's like, I know what's going on. She's like, I have a feeling that you need to go and research this a little deeper. So I feel very lucky that I have a clue of what's going on. It may not be a complete diagnosis. There could be PPD, there could be other things that are going on, but at least I've been steered in the right direction. And my doctor was
definitely a start.
Yeah, and my doctor was honest with me. He said, I know what this is, but I do not know how to treat it. It's going to take you a really long time to find a doctor or to get in with somebody who's going to be able to help you. So I will start by going through protocol of what they do for everybody else. And he had this little book, from like little teeny book, and he was looking in the book and he's like, okay, this is what we're going to go for. And thankfully, I mean, I don't know if it works. There's some days are better, some days aren't. The weather is changing, so we're not in like a stormy season at the moment. So it should be interesting to see what happens. Oh, it should be interesting to see what happens during hurricane season for me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you. And you guys make sure to check out her Instagram. Tell them again one more time before we wrap up.
It's at Vestibular Guru, but I'm not a guru. Just Vestibular Guru.
Disclaimer.
Yes.
Perfect.
Great.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Etta.
Oh, did we do the wrap up?
We did.
Okay.
You're back.
So much. I really appreciate this.
Good. Well, thank you so much for doing this, and we definitely are going to be friends after this.
Absolutely.
Keep in touch.
Yeah, and we'll definitely check back in with you after you see where you're at with your journey in a few months. Yeah.
In July, whenever I finally get to see my doctor, see a doctor.
Well, plus it'll be nice too to check in because, like you say, we'll be in the middle of hurricane season, which for you, and for us, weather is something that greatly affects. So
my human barometer inside, the second the pressure changes, I'm like, on the floor almost, like completely
Ugh,
unable to function. So
Wow.
can't even imagine.
So crazy. That
between Charleston and Miami,
sensitive.
Yeah.
I think but you guys told me about the valley fever, so don't go to the
Yeah.
don't which I looked into and I was like, ooh, no.
Right? I know. We were talking before we did this recording, we were all talking and we're like, where's the best place to live? Like trying to figure out, you know, if anyone knows, let us know. That would be an interesting topic.
Yeah.
And then last thing we wanted to also mention too is that, Amber and I are working on a book for Invisible Diaries. We want to share, a bunch of different tips and tricks, and we're really excited about that, as we're approaching our 1-year anniversary. And we're also going to be launching a quarterly publication. So if anyone wants to contribute, including yourself, Etta, you'd be great. We definitely want to share more stories, and we want more people on our show. We have a couple guests lined up too that we're excited about, and we're super excited and happy to be meeting like-minded people that are coming on our show and reaching out. And again, this is all about community. It's time that our voices are heard, and I feel like, especially with this pandemic, people are starting to recognize us a little bit, and that our lives matter too, and to, and that's
it's like,
great.
oh, it's not fun to be at home all day.
Yeah. I feel like we're like getting to this like great place to where we can finally start to make a difference of some sort. So, and that's all thanks to everybody, all of us together. So
it's a collaboration.
Well, I know a lot of people with some very strange illnesses now. So, that I'll send them your way.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Well, thanks
you,
everybody.
Etta. Yeah.